That's a lie, I screamed, the words ripping through the hushed formality of the lawyer's office, shattering the carefully constructed veneer of grief and respectability that my family had been clinging to for the past week. Every head in the room snapped towards me, their faces, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, all the familiar faces of the extended Sterling clan, a mixture of shock, confusion, and outright disapproval. My voice, raw and trembling, with a mixture of grief and furious certainty, echoed in the sudden silence, bouncing off the mahogany walls and settling like a thunderclap over the polished conference table. My finger, shaking with barely contained rage, jabbed accusingly across the table, pointing directly at him. The man seated opposite me, the man my father's lawyer had just introduced as my long lost brother, the man who was, according to the just read will, about to inherit everything. Everything. The family estate, the businesses, the lifetime of legacy that I, as my father's only acknowledged child, had always assumed would be mine. He's not my brother, I roared, my voice rising even louder, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and a desperate need to expose the truth, to shatter the carefully constructed lie that was threatening to steal not just my inheritance, but my entire family history. He's a fraud. He's been lying to all of you for years. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose face usually resembled a meticulously carved monument of professional composure, actually flinched, his carefully maintained facade of neutrality cracking for the first time. He stammered, his voice losing its usual smooth, legalistic cadence. Miss Sterling, please control yourself. This is hardly the appropriate venue. Appropriate venue? I scoffed, my laughter sharp and bitter, echoing the raw pain and betrayal that was tearing through me. Appropriate venue for what, Mr. Henderson? For politely listening to a stranger steal my family's legacy based on a pack of lies? For pretending that this man, I spat the words out like venom, my gaze fixed on the imposter across the table, is suddenly part of the Sterling family just because your meticulous client, my father, apparently decided to rewrite history in his will? The imposter, my supposed brother, remained infuriatingly calm, infuriatingly composed, his expression a carefully crafted mask of wounded dignity and quiet sorrow. He even had the audacity to offer me a pitying, almost condescending look. His eyes the same unsettling shade of hazel as my father's, I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach, filled with a carefully cultivated air of brotherly concern, disgust. It was hard to tell. The emotions swirling beneath the surface of his practiced composure were as murky and unsettling as the sudden, gaping hole that had just been ripped through my understanding of my own family. Eleanor, he said, his voice smooth, practiced, and utterly devoid of any genuine emotion, my name rolling off his tongue like a practiced line in a poorly rehearsed play. Please, I understand this is upsetting, but surely you can see that this is hardly the time or place for accusations. Let's just process the will. Then perhaps we can discuss your concerns privately. Eleanor, he even knew my name. He even dared to use it with that sickeningly false air of brotherly familiarity, as if we were old friends, long lost siblings reunited after years of separation, not complete strangers thrown together in this bizarre, inheritance fueled melodrama. And that name, spoken by him, that carefully crafted performance of brotherly concern, was almost more infuriating than his blatant attempt to steal my inheritance. Don't you dare call me Eleanor, I hissed, my voice low and dangerous now, trembling with a barely suppressed fury that threatened to erupt into full-blown rage. You have no right to speak my name. You have no right to be here. You are not a Sterling. You are nothing but a liar and a fraud. My aunt, Clara, my father's elder sister, a woman whose voice usually dripped with honeyed southern charm, but who could, on occasion, unleash a tongue sharper than any razor, finally intervened, her usual composure cracking slightly under the weight of the escalating family drama. Eleanor Sterling, she said, her voice laced with a mixture of warning and thinly veiled disapproval. That is quite enough. We are here to honor your father's wishes, not to engage in public accusations and hysterics. Hysterics. Of course. That was always the go-to dismissal for any woman who dared to express strong emotions in my family. Hysterical Eleanor, emotional Eleanor, difficult Eleanor. It was a label I had been fighting against my entire life, a carefully constructed box that my family, especially my more traditional Southern relatives, had always tried to confine me within. And now here I was, seemingly confirming their worst assumptions, erupting in a hysterical outburst in the middle of my father's will reading, playing perfectly into their preconceived notions of emotional women and difficult daughters. But I didn't care. Not anymore. Not when my entire family legacy was on the line. Not when a complete stranger was sitting across the table, calmly, confidently, attempting to steal everything that was rightfully mine based on a lie, a carefully constructed, decades long con that had apparently even fooled my own father. No, Aunt Clara, I said, my voice still trembling, but now infused with a newfound steel, a quiet determination that brooked no argument. Enough is not enough. We are not here to honor my father's wishes. If those wishes were based on deception, if that will was signed under false pretenses, if this man, I gestured again at the impostor, my gaze unwavering, my voice ringing with conviction, is not who he claims to be. We are here to uncover the truth. And the truth, Aunt Clara, is that this man is a liar. To understand the explosive force of my accusation, to grasp the sheer audacity of my hysterical outburst in the face of my family's collective disapproval, we need to rewind back to the beginning, back to the carefully constructed facade of my seemingly normal, perfectly respectable Sterling family life, back to the secrets and shadows that had been lurking beneath the surface for decades, secrets that I, in my naive trust and ingrained family loyalty, had never even suspected existed. My name is Eleanor Sterling, and until a week ago, I thought I knew my family. I thought I knew my father, Arthur Sterling, a pillar of our small southern town, a respected businessman, a devoted family man, a man whose life, as far as I knew, had been an open book, a testament to southern gentility, quiet integrity, and unwavering family values. He was, in the eyes of our community, the epitome of a Sterling man, reserved, dignified, impeccably mannered, and fiercely protective of his family name and legacy. And I, as his only child, had been raised to uphold that legacy, to embody those sterling values, to carry the family name with grace and dignity into the next generation. My mother had passed away when I was young, a tragic accident that had cast a long shadow over our family. But my father had, or so I believed, raised me with unwavering love and devotion, instilling in me the core sterling principles of hard work, honesty, and above all, family loyalty. We were a close knit family, or so it seemed, bound together by shared history, shared values, and a deep, unspoken understanding of our place in the Southern social hierarchy. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins were all integral parts of the Sterling tapestry, a vast, interconnected network of family ties and shared expectations, a world where appearances mattered, where reputation was paramount, and where family secrets were, if possible, buried deep and never, ever spoken of aloud. My father had always been a private man, reserved and somewhat emotionally distant, but I'd always interpreted that as simply part of his sterling stoicism, his ingrained Southern gentlemanly reserve. He wasn't one for grand pronouncements of affection, for open displays of emotion, but I had always felt his love, his quiet support, his unwavering belief in me, even if it was often expressed in subtle, unspoken ways. He had provided for me, guided me, instilled in me the values I held dear, and I had, in turn, striven to be the perfect Sterling daughter, the embodiment of grace, dignity, and quiet respectability that he expected. And then he died. Suddenly, unexpectedly, a heart attack, they said, swift and merciful. Or so everyone kept telling me, as if merciful death could somehow lessen the gaping hole his absence had ripped through my life, through the carefully constructed fabric of my Sterling family world. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to drown me in its depths. But even amidst the raw pain of loss, I clung to the familiar rituals of Sterling family mourning, the hushed condolences, the black dresses, the carefully orchestrated funeral arrangements, the stoic acceptance of fate that was, apparently, another key Sterling family trait. And then came the will reading. The moment when the carefully constructed facade of my Sterling family world began to crumble, when the secrets and shadows that had been lurking beneath the surface for decades finally, explosively, burst into the light, shattering everything I thought I knew about my father, about my family, about my own identity. Mr. Henderson, my father's lawyer, a man who had been a fixture in our family's life for as long as I could remember, had gathered the immediate Sterling clan in his hushed, oak paneled office, the air thick with unspoken grief and a palpable undercurrent of anticipation, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of inheritance fueled avarice. It was hard to tell. The emotions swirling beneath the surface of polite Southern morning were as murky and unsettling as the secrets that were about to be revealed. He cleared his throat, adjusted his reading glasses, and began to read, his voice smooth and professional, reciting the dry, legalistic language of my father's last will and testament, outlining the meticulously detailed distribution of assets, the careful allocation of properties, the predictable bequests to various charities and longtime employees. It was all perfectly Sterling, perfectly predictable, perfectly boring until he reached that clause, that sentence, that name. And to my son, Julian Devereux, Mr. Henderson read, his voice pausing slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if even he was taken aback by the sudden, jarring intrusion of this unknown name into the familiar Sterling family narrative. I bequeath the entirety of my estate, including Sterling Manor, Sterling Industries, and all associated assets, to be held in trust for him until his 30th birthday, at which time full ownership shall be transferred to him unconditionally. Silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, it felt like the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Every head snapped up, every gaze fixed on Mr. Henderson, their faces mirroring my own shock, my own disbelief, my own utter bewilderment. Julian Devereux? Who in God's name was Julian Devereux? And why in heaven's name was my father leaving everything to him? My Aunt Clara was the first to break the stunned silence, her voice sharp, incredulous, laced with a distinct note of Southern outrage. Julian Devereux? She repeated, her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching dramatically. Arthur's son? Mr. Henderson, I must have misheard you. Arthur only had one child. Eleanor, my niece, sitting right here. She gestured towards me, her voice ringing with indignant certainty, her gaze fixed accusingly on the lawyer, as if he were somehow personally responsible for this outrageous, impossible will. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat again, adjusted his glasses again, and repeated the clause, his voice now slightly firmer, slightly more defensive, but still tinged with a hint of discomfort. No, Mrs. Davenport, you heard correctly. The will clearly states, to my son, Julian Devereux. And, he added, shuffling through the papers on the table, extracting a separate document, a sealed envelope, bearing my father's unmistakable signature. I have here a letter, addressed to Miss Eleanor Sterling, to be read in the event of Mr. Sterling's passing. Perhaps, he suggested, his gaze flickering nervously towards me, this will clarify matters. He handed me the envelope, his touch hesitant, almost apologetic, as if he too sensed the seismic shift that was about to rock the foundations of the Sterling family. My fingers trembled as I took the envelope, the paper feeling strangely heavy, strangely ominous in my suddenly numb hands. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, terrifying silence in the room. My gaze met my Aunt Clara's, her expression a mixture of concern and thinly veiled suspicion, her eyes silently urging me to open the letter, to unravel the mystery, to explain the impossible, to restore order to the suddenly chaotic Sterling family universe. With a deep breath, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the paper, I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter, my eyes scanning the familiar, yet suddenly alien handwriting of my father, the words swimming before my tear-blurred vision. The truth, the devastating, family-shattering truth, leaping off the page, confirming my worst fears, and plunging the carefully constructed world of Eleanor Sterling, Sterling daughter, into utter, irreparable chaos. The letter began simply, starkly, brutally honestly. My dearest Eleanor, it read, there is something I must tell you. Something I should have told you long ago. Julian Devereux is your brother. And in that moment, reading those impossible, life altering words, the carefully constructed world of Eleanor Sterling, Sterling daughter, shattered into a million pieces. And the stranger sitting across the table, the man my father had named as his son, my brother, the man I had just accused of being a liar and a fraud, suddenly became not just a threat to my inheritance, but a terrifying, undeniable, and utterly unwelcome intrusion into the very heart of my family, my past, my identity, and everything I thought I knew about my life. The carefully buried secrets were unearthed, the shadows were exposed, and the Sterling family, my family, was about to be irrevocably and perhaps fatally changed forever.